Thank you all.
Thank you so much. I think going from panel 1 to panel 2 is just smooth transition, since we already spoke about measurement and viewership behavior changing, all of it being online, and therefore also that distribution has already moved. The conversation has moved from linear TV to online, etc. So I think we can just jump right into the conversation here. Raktim, if I can, start with you. I want your views on, you have everything from YouTube to an app to, I'm sure, a social media presence, all of that. So if you had to compare the new age platforms where you distribute news content from the network, which are the ones that garner most viewership? I think profitability follows first, where the viewership is. So if you can give us a sense of that to begin with.
Thank you. First and foremost, what I would like to mention is that just to pick up from where you started in the first panel, a user actually, as you said, looks at almost 5 platforms when he is accessing the entire content, right? If you add to that how the user is accessing content, leveraging a publisher website or app, in that figures that you had told in the earlier panel, I think about 45 to 50% of the users are also accessing content from publisher, apps and website. But the fact of the matter is that there are those 8-9 platforms through which various content formats needs to be put across to the user. And that is where I feel the content format is very critical. You have live streaming content for which you have the likes of YouTube. Today you have connected TV, which adds to the linear platforms. And then you have content formats which are essentially VOD content formats. And that is where the content type, in terms of what kind of content that you want to put in for these various formats in which the content can reach the consumer. VOD content, if you look at the VOD content, you see a lot of publishers and broadcasters getting into explainer content. A lot of content is also in the form of docu features. A lot of content is also in terms of snackable content. So you have content which is just about, say, 60 minutes, for which you have the likes of shorts, you have the likes of reels, which is only applicable to particular social media platforms. So from a publisher or a broadcaster perspective, the format in which various content needs to be repurposed, keeping in mind the various distribution platforms which are available today, is very critical. And that is where I think technology will also play a very big role in terms of how speed and scale can be enabled. Because if there is a particular news which has happened, you would have live streaming content happening there. The same content, how you could also curate a lot of shoulder content, which would be around, say, explainers or docu features. And also from the perspective of a news broadcaster, you also look at one very important factor. News is mostly perishable content. So what I put up as a live streaming content is something which might not be relevant to the consumer maybe 24 hours down the line. But if there is an opportunity, or if there is a way that we can actually transform news into content, because if you look at news per se, quote unquote, it is essentially how you put up the real breaking news, how you do a lot of, say, feature-based content. But if you can actually create content out of the news which has got a library value, that also lends in a lot of value to the entire broadcaster. So broadly, if I have to answer your question, 3 things that needs to be kept in mind. One is the content format, and how do the content format align with the various platforms in which the content can be taken to the consumer. Second is, how do you build up speed and scale leveraging technology? It could be automation, it could be in terms of understanding the consumer needs through big data analytics. It could be even in terms of trying to leverage IoT in terms of how to give an experiential experience to the consumer in terms of how he accesses the content. And the third point is essentially in terms of how do you build in the unified measurement, which is what we discussed in the previous panel also. Finally, when you are distributing content through various platforms in various formats, at the end of everything for a media company, there are 2 things that we look at. One is that I either build traffic or I drive revenue. So if I have to build traffic and if I have to earn revenue, I also need to sort of unify the entire measurement ecosystem.
So are your digital destinations where you house your content, are you building revenue there, or are they just driving traffic?
So it's a mix of both. Finally, if you have good traffic, that will automatically lead to revenue. So
right now, where are you? I mean, in that journey, where are you as we stand today? Is it more of a traffic building place?
So finally, you have to make money. So monetization is extremely critical, and there is various ways in which you look at the monetization aspect. One is essentially in terms of how do you build in various formats of advertising. So when I say formats of advertising, one is your regular display advertising, which happens in terms of pre-rolls, mid-rolls, in terms of FCT, which goes into television channels. And then there is also way of how do you integrate the brand story into the content that you are providing to the consumer. So which is where it's just not about the old way of creating branded content or the old way of doing events and all of that. It is about how you seamlessly or organically build in the brand story in the content in various formats that you are taking to the consumer.
Got it. Madhu, if I can bring you in, you know, the question I have for you is, as watching Nitin Kamath, you know, short video, if you will, a few days ago, and this was the interview that he had with the content creators, and in that Tanmay Bhatt said that a successful top tier YouTuber or influencer would make $1 million just from YouTube ads annually, and we're talking about one person making that much only from YouTube ads, not from branded content, not from the brand deals, not from writing ads, none of that. Where are news broadcasters in that journey with making money? If influencers are doing this, are news broadcasters anywhere close to this?
Thank you for the opportunity. So I would like to answer that by dipping into what one of the previous panelists said. We as news publishers are competing with a whole host of new providers of news. I would not call them fellow publishers, but they are providers of news or information. So where a Tanmay Bhatt is confidently saying that an influencer can easily make $1 million, I work for WION. And if we have to position ourselves as an international channel, we have to operate in the cable and satellite space, what is called as the C&S space. We would have to pay a single C&S operator more than $1 million to make ourselves available. So that's the dichotomy that we are dealing with. That's where our necessity was the mother of invention, where we went to the connected TV route. Rather than get into an individual distribution deal with each and every C&S operator in our relevant markets, we try to operate with the Samsungs of the world and the Rokus and the Apple and the Fire TVs. And that's how we are in 190 countries right now. Does their reputation as WION translate to revenue? Not yet. But we are getting there because as we discussed in what we call a water cooler conversation outside, it's a chicken and egg situation. We need to get the distribution piece right before the advertisers take us seriously. And that's where we are now competing with all kinds of people who are offering what is called news, but the effort that goes into making credible, trusted news content, which like what Raktim said, which then becomes snackable and shareable, involves a lot of money where the participation among partners, which is us publishers and the advertisers, is extremely important. We need a collaborative effort, and I will stick my neck out and say, anybody betting on news today has to be a brave heart.
Vikas, your views, I mean, you've worn multiple hats, right? And right now, in your role, you are assisting news broadcasters in reaching that wider audience, finding newer avenues to both distribute and monetize. Where do you see the gaps in, there's an opportunity and possibly it's not being leveraged as much? Right.
I think Raktim pointed out myriad options of distribution that is available to most news players today, right? Right from web, their own apps, other third-party platforms to distribute content on in various form factors. My view with perspective to broadcasters is that there is a lot of effort, energy, planning that goes into building that broadcast asset, right? Which is a live asset, which is where the brand brings in most amount of its revenue, right? So if I look at like-to-like comparison, a reach that a channel drives from television today is still much larger than the same reach being driven off the web platform today, right? I want to take just a relevant example of what I saw in one of the Samsung ads deck, which was presented in US and Australia. I think it was the US market, where there were about 18% of the content available on the platform was news, and that was driving almost 48% of the viewership and watch time, right? Now that's very relevant and interesting because clearly the popularity of news and the live asset is huge, right? What we've been doing, especially in context of the last few years, is that a lot of broadcasters have put out their live assets on platforms where a lot of them do not monetize those live assets, right? So it's become a chest thumping tool about what's the volume of watch time, what's the concurrency, what's the viewership it's driving, but it's not driving any revenue. Cut to today, and a lot of us on this platform are clearly seeing that the technology, the ad tech capabilities, the opportunities for you to distribute this content and monetize exists. So I personally believe that it's a great period for a bunch of news networks. They can actually build this opportunity and scale up their revenues many folds if they just figure out how they want to focus on the future of distribution, right? And which is, in my view, live is going to be a phenomenal part of that journey for most broadcasters.
Kunal, if I can bring you in here, Samsung TV has been, I think, helping, again, channels be there on TVs, but not linear, and moving that CTV piece forward. And you're seeing how Samsung TV is helping channels, broadcasters in other markets internationally. So if you can help us, maybe give us a little sneak peek into what sort of success channels possibly in other markets are having, that can give us a sense of where the CTV distribution and fast channels can take news broadcasters in India.
I'd like to give you a little perspective on what's going on in India first. And Vikas quoted, a deck from the US market. I think we're seeing similar or more, numbers in India. We currently have about 35% of the channel bouquet is made up of news channels, and I'd like to give it to the news channels who've taken this opportunity and innovated and worked with us, and so are reaping benefits also. 50% of the entire viewership today on Samsung TV Plus, which is our FLAST platform, comes out of news broadcasters. And not only the Hindi mainstream channels, but slightly going niche into English and further into maybe a India world perspective on news like WION, or the regional channels are also seeing a major uptake on CTV, on FAST at Samsung. The thing is, when we started off in 2021, it was very early, for the news broadcasters or any other content providers in India to understand the potential of FAST or of CTV. But today, courtesy the uptake of smart televisions, we circa about 10 million TVs out there today. Automatically, the viewers have also moved to exploring what FAST is actually, and it's becoming an alternative for viewers who are primarily cord cutters or not streaming live linear content to coming and exploring CTV or FAST, and finding the content slightly more relevant, the ads more premium, and all of that is helping us grow together.
Got it. Raktim, if I can bring you back, I think it was during the IPL that Geo sold CTV separately. I mean, it wasn't just part of the bouquet and, buy it on CPMs, but they were doing spot selling. This was the news. How is it that you are selling the digital, assets that you have, the inventory that you have? Are you placing a premium tag on it? Are you seeing great interest from advertisers who might want to reach that premium audience? If you can give us an idea.
So, from the CTV perspective, so if you look at our entire bouquet, we have 6 channels which are in 6 different languages. And if you also look at how the language market is panning out, so if you look at a recent report, it says that the entire internet population, so active monthly users, if it is say around say 750 million right now, expected to be 900 million in next couple of years, 9 out of almost 10 every new users will come in from the languages market. So that's one very critical factor in terms of what would be the uptake of various language channels on the CTV platform. So from our perspective and also from an industry perspective, I feel that languages also on the connected TV ecosystem will start gaining a lot of viewership. And from monetization perspective, there are 2 ways, because it depends on the kind of partnerships that you have with various CTV players. In that aspect, so you have a way of selling advertising which is programmatic, wherein the partner will fill in the inventory basis this cutty that you introduce in the stream that you provide to them. And second option is also that you also have the opportunity to sell that. So which is where again it boils down to how do you measure the audience in a unified way. So one option could also be that you try and bundle the CTV selling from the broadcaster side along with the linear selling. The second option could also be in terms of you try and bring in nice, organic, seamless integration as part of your studios, and innovation would be key in that. So when I say innovation, it will be both content innovation in terms of how do you bring in brand stories as part of content that you put out on connected TV, and also in terms of technology innovation, ad tech innovations. Because if you look at the connected TV ecosystem, I recently had attended a conference which was done by Google in New York City. So one of the options which came out over there is that when you have an ad on connected TV, it is extremely premium audience, right? And it is an interactive medium. So on the television screen, you are actually seeing the merging of internet and television. So if you see an ad, and if that ad is clickable, then suddenly the experience transforms and gets into a mobile device, and you could actually go into a commerce kind of experience where you can end up buying the particular product. So I feel from a future perspective, the convergence of the internet and the television and it transforming into a super medium, and the opportunities in terms of technology enabling advertising to bring in more commerce and providing more ROI to the advertiser is something which will evolve very soon, and that is something which will drive the future of monetization. But currently, it is like a I sell, you sell kind of a partnership wherein some part of the inventory is being sold by us, some part of the inventory is being sold by the partner.
Okay. Madhu, you want to, chime in?
No, I don't want to challenge him because he's actually channeling my thoughts. So we just had this conversation in the morning because my question to the advertisers is, do you still value news as a proposition? There are questions out there. Our credibility is almost at rock bottom internationally. So many people, because of brand safety with YouTube touts or your own internal guidelines, you tend to drift away from news. But if we put compelling, credible news out there, will the advertisers come back to us? That's my question. That's a challenge that I pose to my newsroom every day. Is the news that we put out useful enough, not just for our audience, but also for our commercial partners? That's where, to talk to what Raktim is speaking about, I also take care of Z business, not plugging it. So there are people who actually make money by watching business news. The cross-platform sell should make it possible for us tomorrow, for somebody who's made, let's say, 20,000 rupees or 30,000 rupees to make a purchase decision based on the advertisement that he's seeing on his connected device, right? So the shop now option that is there on wherever should translate to his mobile phone, and he should be able to buy or sell. If that is closer to a festive season, even better. it might lead to one more Samsung TV Plus sale for Kunal. So that ecosystem being the last mile being connected, whereby you actually get feedback which is translatable to a transactional revenue, is where probably the secret sauce is.
Sorry, Vikas, I want you to come in on that about closing that loop. I think that's where, I mean, that's the holy grail, right? So I want to understand from you I guess that's yet to happen for content like sports. We are still seeing the kind of ads that we would on CTV and YouTube or wherever as we would see on linear television. So where's that conversation about making CTV ads, fast ads, programmatic, closing that loop, connecting content to commerce?
You're taking your question in two parts, right? The first question is that how do, like cricket or any sporting activity, how do you bring similar kind of brands into the CTV space as you bring on linear assets? And to take cue from what Raktim was saying, I think this partnership model where the content is monetized by both the platform and the content who really understands their audiences and the content they're putting out, I think it's the best way to sort of bring in that incremental revenue opportunity, at least in the first stage. And I think that with the ability of the content owner and the large sales teams that they have much deeper access into local markets, is my view. So that evangelizing to the SME advertisers can be beautifully done by the direct sales team who are in touch with these SME clients across the board. As far as the commerce layer is concerned, I again, picking cue from what he just said, that was an interesting point. I'm seeing a lot of other engagement tools that are coming in. For example, there was an Iris TV presentation that I was sitting through where they're bringing the right kind of contextual banner ads within the right content, right? And this happens programmatically, and you're able to then sort of bring in really interesting layers of relevant ads to the relevant people, which can also bring a great way to sort of funnel in the audiences and close in the loop. So I think a lot will happen over the next maybe couple of years as the technology evolves, as the distribution evolves in the space.
Kunal, I want your thoughts on this partnership and collaboration that the broadcaster representatives here are talking about. Is that while monetization could be happening, that money is being distributed between the publisher and the platform. What are the international standards for this, and what kind of a framework do you see evolving where the broadcaster possibly, since they are putting in the money and making that content, their investment here is larger, they get a fair share of the revenue?
I think it's pretty much standardized across Samsung. We're currently present in 24 countries. The same models available abroad are the same models that we work with broadcasters in India. Broadcasters are free to monetize their own inventory. We do, as Raktim said, we either do a revenue share where we monetize. We, by the way, have a full-blown sales team selling inventory. We also do majority of the ads that are currently on FAST are programmatic, but we've invested into a team. We continue to invest into the team, working with all major agencies, to fill in the inventory. But having said that, there's obviously room and there is a gap in terms of the fill rates. So there's obviously room for the broadcasters to chip in. They've been doing this business for a while, and happy to accommodate on an inventory share basis also with the broadcasters. So as Avinash was saying, we're happy to complete the pie where they're producing the content as well as selling the content, as well as having all the data possible out of CTV, so the entire loop is complete for them. Yeah, that's my thought.
Madhu, does that give you confidence?
No, obviously we have to. We are all optimists in the new space, right? We have no other option. No, I would like to, see, again, I would like to address another thing where there is a negative perception around news, right? That's why many advertisers tend to stay away from news. But given the reach of digital, we are throwing ourselves right out there. And as a former journalist, I will tell you, in any calendar year, there are 2 or 3 seismic news events. And we are supposed to ride the wave and then figure out whether that translates to revenue. One of the things that we try and do is, rather, like the recent example is the Hamas-Israel conflict. Now on YouTube, we get 0 revenue from that because that is considered negative news. But our traffic numbers shoot through the roof. Now, how do we translate that? So the best way to do that is push out equally compelling, credible content which are not conflict related, because people see value in what you put out around the conflict. They see value in what other things we do. That's where we want the everyday bands to come to us and say, okay, we like the association around non-conflict news. But that's a journey that we need to do together, where you need to be cognizant about whether you see news as a valuable proposition both to you and the society. And I have a very philosophical approach to news. News is valuable to the society. If you see news as just a transactional, commoditized piece, which comes after IPL and ICC World Cup and then GEC and then films and then thoda bahut baki hai to we'll look at news as well, then it's a challenge for us. Then you will see news channels putting out content that you and I are not comfortable with. So it needs to be collaborative. We need to partner each other in this effort, because news is just not a commodity. It is a service to the nation. So that's where I come from.
Raktim, your thoughts on the content piece and how news is being perceived?
Just to pick up from what Madhu just said, trust and credibility, this is very critical when it comes to news. And the other important factor is also about how do you try and make news as much as possible non-perishable, because that's very critical. We dish out content every second, every minute, but then maybe 24 hours down the line, it doesn't remain relevant. So I'll just give you an example. We have this OTT platform called News9 Plus, which is the world's first news OTT. I'll just give an example, and also what he spoke about the Israel-Hamas. So when the Ukraine war started, you had a lot of Indians and Indian students who were stuck up there. So you had Operation Ganga, which happened and which transported a lot of Indian citizens back to India. So that was the time when we created a series called The Airlift. Now the Airlift was a very nice way, docu feature of how the Indian students and the Indian citizens were brought back to the country. And it was a nice, say about 9 to 10 minute web series of about, say, 4-part web series. Now cut to the recent phenomenon wherein you had the Israel-Hamas thing and you had Operation Ajay happening there. So we came up with a season 2 of the same piece of content which was created there, saying the Airlift season 2. Now you bring in a lot of value in that kind of production. You try and do almost like a GEC kind of production with the cost sensitivities of a news organization that enables a news organization to create content which is more credible and which will last for a longer period of time, maybe 5 years down the line, still people would want to watch that content. And that content piece, when it is on, say, third-party platforms like YouTube, it will give you views down the years, and that is how the monetization happens. Because finally, what is happening today, video is omnipresent at this point in time, right? And from the video perspective, earlier, what one used to look at news, it used to be a video experience of news. Right? When you see a YouTube channel, you wanted a video experience of news. Now what is happening is that you want more of a storytelling experience of the video, right? So there is a transition which is happening from a video experience of news to a storytelling experience of the video within the larger ecosystem of news, and which is what I think news organizations need to invest in terms of creating content which is non-perishable, which has got library value, and which will continue to give you return in terms of revenue for times to come.
Madhu, you want to say something?
I think we are kind of doing well, not just the fact that we are wearing grey suits. I think we all are wearing grey suits. The thing is, we are all storytellers at the end of the day, right? I think one of the first things that I said when I came back to India was, I moved from telling stories to selling stories. So, if branded content is what we are looking for, there is no better avenue than a video publisher telling your story the way you want it. We can tell a story well. And if you have to look at video, we need to seriously consider vernacular as well. And then another point that Raktim mentioned is about how do you, news which is primarily a perishable commodity, how do we create residual revenue from a perishable commodity? One of the things that we should and we can explore if somebody is not doing it is, look at in-flight entertainment, look at licensing. Licensing is a multi-billion-dollar industry out there. We news publishers create, like what he said, what is snackable, shareable, docu-series, they all can be licensed as even in-flight entertainment, all kinds of hotel people, they all look at content that is neutral, non-controversial, which people can view without looking at the timeline or the dateline. So those are the avenues that we need to explore to make news, which is otherwise a perishable commodity, an avenue for residual revenue.
Thank you so much. I think those are great thoughts. And, going back to this question about what are the most profitable ways to get content across, I think the answer lies in the content from what you're talking about, in extending that life of that piece of content that you make it adaptable to different forms. I mean, 60 seconds, 15 seconds, 1 minute, longer than that, so that you can monetize it in as many ways as possible. And then also, like Vikas was saying, and there's Kunal also, who are talking about just selling that live inventory that you have, because news is primarily at least consumed live first, and then comes the informative piece. So time's up, and thank you so much for all of those insights that you've shared with us today. We now have an interview with Avinash Kaul. Thank you so much, everybody.